Now we're giving a word to Claudia Schembri Heitmann. She will deliver a speech on the topic of consciousness-based integrative approach about body talk system also and bio system together. And let's give her a word.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are on this planet and whenever you're watching this lecture. I welcome you to this special experience of connecting on this virtual platform in this special time as well for humanity and all living beings. And the subject of this conference is obviously also very specific: science, information, and spirit. So in a way, we're not just connected through technology, we're actually connected in spirit through the field of consciousness. And once we have an awareness about this, and once we are mindful of this, we can obviously observe shifts and changes in ourselves, in the people around us, no matter what we do in life as a professional or even individual being, and hopefully create powerful ripple effects. So to me, this specific weekend here has the potential of creating a ripple effect in the whole of humanity and mankind, from the perspective of health and healing and wholeness, something that's obviously desperately needed right now. So I would like to welcome you from really the bottom of my heart, which for me is the center of wholeness and consciousness. And I hope we all enjoy this special journey together. Now, the subject of my talk is about holistic healthcare, integrative healthcare, consciousness-based healthcare, and the specific approach that I feel is needed if we really want to go beyond the limitations we sometimes come across when working as a naturopath, which is my main profession, and working in other aspects of healthcare. Because the whole challenge we face is that people come into our clinics and they come for a treatment and then they go back home. And based on my background in my work, often these treatments will have ripple effects in the person's life for many hours and weeks to come, and obviously manifest as shifts and changes in the physical, emotional, mental, or even spiritual well-being. However, if this person is just one person from a whole field of people, which we call matrix, then it could be a major challenge, because if that field where this person is a member of is imbalanced, incoherent, it's actually what we call destructive, then this individual being might have a hard time really staying connected to their level of wholeness and health and well-being, which may have come about through a session, a treatment, a balance. And so the whole idea is, what if we can look beyond the individual and integrate all of these different approaches into one specific approach? So the subject and the topic of my talk has come about of my 30 plus years of personal and professional experience, and also my most recent research for my doctorate and PhD studies in quantum medicine. And so I have been working in the healthcare field for many, many years. I was always into healthcare, but I actually came from a conventional side. And slowly but surely, because I was always looking for more, I couldn't understand why people wouldn't get better, or they got better and then they got worse again, and all of that. So I was always looking for more. What can I do for myself? What can I do for my family? What can I do for my patients? What is it that is limiting, the constant or continuous improvement or level of well-being? Now I'm sure we're all aware that life is going through fluctuations. We live in the world of duality and polarity. So health and disease also have to have a very specific level of balance. And but the question is why some people heal easier and why some people have a bigger challenge in healing. So this helped me, or not helped me, but led me into looking more into what else is there. So already based on my background, specifically working with the body talk system for many years, teaching the body talk system for many years, and also training instructors for many years, we have a very specific section on our so-called protocol chart, which relates to the environment. And already in that respect, I realized there are so-called environmental factors out there, which are mirrored in imbalances in my body-mind complex in here. So it's all about the relationship of the individual human being and his or her outer environment. But then we also have an aspect of our environment, which is the so-called inner environment. Now, the inner environment is tackled and addressed with lots of healthcare modalities and obviously nutrition and all these aspects. So, this is how I came, about trying to research more and also embracing other modalities. One of them being an energy field modality called source point therapy, and also one which is specifically helping to harmonize the environment and the environment we live in, which is biogeometry. And so to me, all of these different modalities created a huge puzzle, and I'm hoping to share some of my excitement for this holistic approach, which is there for anyone to embrace, to learn, or to learn more about. So the future of healthcare lies in a consciousness-based integrative approach, and it must include emphasis on the environment. So I already mentioned this earlier on now in my talk, that to me, this is playing a very, very important role if we want to address health and healing holistically. Okay. And so over the years, I've become quite an expert in what we call matrices. So what is a matrix? And so I'm just sharing with you the topic of my dissertation, which is the idea that when we are using a very holistic quantum and consciousness-based approach to working with people, we can actually help to change the individual by addressing the group this individual might be a member of. So what does that mean? Now, we're all members of specific groups. We are a member of a family. We're a member of a work matrix, as we call it. We're a member of a club, be it sports, leisure time, knitting, whatever. We have friends. So these are all fields interacting with one another. And the whole idea is, if I am quite stable and strong in myself, so I've done a lot of consciousness-based work. I go regularly for treatments and sessions. I move healthily. I sleep well. I have very good nutrition and so forth. May not be affected by the field of the group so much in a so-called negative way. However, not everyone has that benefit yet of being so strong and healthy from inside. Now, the other factor is that a lot of people encounter stressors. Stress is the big thing, right? We talk about stress, or I'd rather have to say distress situations are the main cause of inflammation in the body, and inflammation is again the main cause of chronic disease. And so how can we, as holistic practitioners, support the people from this perspective? And when we're really diving into the aspect and the influence, the potential influence of the fields that surround us. Now, there's many fields, which we'll come to in a moment, but if we're really looking into the idea of a field has the potential to influence me in a so-called negative way, so the field must also have the potential to influence me in a health supportive, healing way. So the whole idea of providing this balanced energy field that was part of my research was people don't have to do anything for it. I can enter a healthy space. So most of you have had the experience. You enter a space, if you're like, wow, all my symptoms are gone. So these are usually sacred spaces, which are related to strong sacred energy spots and power spots on our planet. But they could also be just sometimes very balanced and harmonized homes, which, just exhibit the energy of love and wholeness and well-being, or whoever is living there. So why can't I do that also from a human or living field perspective? So And obviously all of that would be best to work in combination. So let's keep that in mind as well. So the idea is I go to work and I just feel better. Wouldn't that be an ideal situation? So this is how I kind of came about this process of working with fields. I've worked with fields many years, but this was very specific. So again, I don't want to share I cannot really share my research results with you because they're just too vast. But what I can say is addressing the field of people with a very specific support system here can definitely have a health beneficial effect on the individual group members. So people would really enjoy going to work. That would be the side effect, rather than dragging going to work. And so you never know. And it doesn't really matter whether I actually physically go to work or I work from a home office. The moment I am in work mode, I'm actually connected. As a matrix member, I'm actually connected to that field. There's lots of factors that are actually also determining whether an energy field can be healthy right from the beginning. But this is obviously very specialized, what we would have to look at. So let's continue our journey here. Okay, so for me, when I was looking for how can I measure these changes, when working with a field, how can you see changes? The individuals are not even involved. They would not give you subjective, direct feedback. You cannot even individually, evaluate them every day when the treatments are happening. So I was looking for subtle energy devices, and this is when I kind of met again GDV, because I have been knowing it for a long time. So I was really excited when one of my biogeometry colleagues actually introduced me to BioWell. I said, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to utilize. And apart from heart rate variability and biogeometry, so I used, also conventional evaluation modalities such as blood pressure, heart rate, oxygen saturation, just also to see, what effect the treatments could have on the individual basis and level. Now, there's a lot of factors involved when you're working with groups. And so obviously we have to set the boundaries or the parameters very straightforward here. And so being, in this field of energy based and consciousness-based modalities is very exciting. So the main modalities, as I mentioned early on, that I used during the research is body talk system, biogeometry, source point, and I forgot to mention that systems constellation work, because you may have heard about family systems constellation, which is also used for diseases, which is also used for groups at work and so forth. It's a powerful modality which helps to reorganize the energy field of the field and have an effect on the individual human beings there. But again, the individuals often have to be involved. So I would like to just go on and briefly, because the main subject here is environment, briefly highlight a definition basically around what is consciousness. Because if we say consciousness-based integrative healthcare, what does that really mean? And the same goes also for the other two main words in my title. So one statement which really resonates with me, and as you will hear later on, resonance is a very important aspect when we are talking about this interconnectivity and which direction am I going, for health or for disease. Resonance plays an important role. So, Amit Goswami, consciousness is the ground of all being, not matter. So what does he really mean by that? So to me, that image, the ocean, is a good metaphor of describing the universal field which we are all part of and connected to, no matter whether we are asleep or awake. So that doesn't really change. However, Ramesh Balsekar always used to say, consciousness is all there is. And there's consciousness at rest. So to me, that is kind of the ocean of consciousness. And there's consciousness in movement. Now, movement can be in relation to the whole human being. Once we are born, we could be compared to a wave in the ocean. And obviously, there's many human beings, so there's many waves in the ocean of consciousness. We're all unique beings, appearances from a deep interconnectivity and underlying resonance in a way of the human archetypal energy and the consciousness that connects us all. But we also have to remember that whatever is manifest in the world of movement, which means motion, which means polarity, which means duality. And so if we really want to tap into our potential of health, wholeness, and healing, sometimes we have to dive back into the ocean where it is at rest. Now, this is, there's different possibilities where and how this can happen. However, one very specific moment, which we all have, hopefully every day, is when we're in deep sleep. Okay, so when we are in delta, our brainwaves are in delta, we also are the ocean. And so there's a lot of recovery, sorting, reorganization that has the potential to take place in that, at that specific time. Now, Lynn McTaggart obviously has done a lot of research and brought together a lot of people and also a lot of information. So considering my definition, my pathway of definition of manifestation and consciousness, I felt this quote from her is quite fitting. In a sense, the act of observation, in the act of observation, we are transforming the timeless, spaceless world, which is the ocean of consciousness, of interference patterns. Now, this is a very important term here because the underlying fabric of the whole process of manifestation is not just nothing, void. There is actually what we call geometry. There are fractal patterns. And these fractal patterns are all interlinked and interconnected in very specific ways. Even in our body, the EEG, the heartbeat, all of that are fractal patterns, and we are no longer in a very coherent way, then disease sets in. So science and conventional medicine is actually doing research in this perspective. And as we know from a Chinese perspective, where we say the microcosm and the macrocosm, and they're one unit of function. So it's always a mirroring that is going on. So if I see something incoherent out there, we have to see what's happening with me in here. Am I affected? Am I in resonance? Am I attracted to that incoherence? Or can I just be a neutral observer? So again, sorry, we are transforming the timeless, spaceless world of interference patterns into the concrete and discrete world of space and time. So the aspect of duality and the 4 dimensions we live in. So from that perspective, we also have to see or say that consciousness is behind everything. It is in everything, and is basically the creator of manifestation, but it's also part of that whole manifestation process. Now, when we're looking into the aspects of quantum science and quantum physics, a lot of different people have talked about the so-called downward causation model, or sometimes also top-down causation model. So there is different levels and layers of frequencies of manifestation. They're all mirrored on, if I look at my hand, I have the physical here, I have the vital here, I have the mental here, I have the supramental and the bliss level here. However, when we're talking conceptual and so forth, it's sometimes easier to separate them out. And if I want to have or address someone, I have to address them on all these levels, because we don't know where their causative level is. Now, I'm not going to go into these different models. I just want us to remember, whatever we are measuring on a quantitative level, okay, is usually already mirrored at some extent, or perceivable also in some extent by our senses, the physical and the subtle senses. So that will be quite far down in the frequency range of manifestation. There's a lot of layers of manifestation where we don't have access to via our 5 senses. And so we have to also see this as part of the health and healing process. This specific model, so I've just picked the model by Amit Goswami because this is the main model we used at the Quantum University. And so we can see there is different specifics we could relate these so-called 5 bodies of consciousness to. And it's quite interesting that we have, later on I will show you a chart of different modalities that are addressing these different layers of consciousness, because we have to see where's the cause of my problem. Okay. Now, This is a chart I created just to highlight that interconnectivity, that consciousness is within a whole process of manifestation. It's present in all areas and aspects of life. I cannot leave it out of the equation. And so we have to remember that. And if we have the potential and the possibility of addressing this, just knowing about it, you know, that all is interlinked to the aspects of water, of consciousness, of the ocean and the waves, that may also already shift our perception as a practitioner, or even if we're dealing with people in a different context. Now, what is health? What is healthcare? Or I call it healthcare for the whole human being. Hippocrates, who lived so many years ago, you know, already described health as defined health as a very specific subject here. And to me, it's very valid even in this day and age. Health is the result of dynamic balance. So it's not static, it's not stagnating. There's a perfect optimal balance, not too much and not too little. And it can also be referred to as being in sync. Being in sync of what? Of an individual's relationship, for a start, with him or herself. His or her core nature. Whom am I supposed to be? Not who am I trying to be or acting to be. And also their environmental, outer environmental, but also inner environmental, and so-called cultural influences. Now, cultural influences, to me, it's also our inherited, our genetic trends and epigenetic trends, which we look at today. Now, also, we have to look at the factor that health is not just the absence of disease, but it's a whole idea of health is how can I maintain that dynamic balance, right? How can I maintain my so-called sense of coherence? And how can I remain adaptable? So how can I keep that ability to, no matter what's happening in my life, be able to face the challenges and the changes, which are definitely there as part of the whole manifestation process. And here we come again, the relationship with the environment. So environment to me is the key factor, which is often being neglected. So I want to dive now into that main portion of my lecture here. So I've several times now differentiated the aspect of the inner and the outer environment. And you all may have different backgrounds in what you know about the physical body and the energy field of the body and so forth. So I just want to bring it all together so we're all in the same wavelength here. So what I've designed here is, for me, a summary chart of psychoneuroendocrinoimmunology, sorry, PNEI. And so this is basically the inner environment, which is also mirrored. So the endocrine system has a physical, physiological aspect to it. It has a vital, emotional aspect to it. It has a mental, psychological aspect to it, and it also has a spiritual aspect of it. Same goes for the nervous system. Same goes for the immune system. So all of these systems need to be able to communicate with one another, need to be able to balance one another and be coherent with one another. We call it also, there has to be a level of tensegrity to the tiniest molecules in our body. Now, all of this is governed in different hierarchies of consciousness, consciousness of function in the body-mind complex, and then it's also in the relationship of this body-mind complex in relation to the so-called outer environment. So the question is really, where do I stop as a human being? Okay, I stop at the end of the universe, and still I have my specific trends and tendencies based on genetics, epigenetics, and so forth. Now, we can also look at, what other aspects. Remember, the physical, emotional, mental, spiritual aspects are always part and parcel of that whole equation, which is often not being kept in mind when we're kind of trying to analyze the body, diagnose the body, and so forth. So in order to be in tune, to be in sync, and optimize the coherence and the level of relationships, we actually have to also look at the specific pacemakers, or Zeitgebers as they're called, the inner rhythms, the outer rhythms, the so-called biorhythms. Am I supposed to be awake now? Am I supposed to be sleeping now? Is it now winter or summer where I live? What kinds of food should I be eating or not be eating? How am I dealing with my emotional everyday events? Am I allowing them to be processed there and then, or do they just fill up my emotional database here? Am I stuck in a rut of belief systems, behavior patterns, and so forth? Now, this is all addressed with lots of different modalities, which I don't have to go into, I believe. However, most recent years, a very important modality, also in conventional healthcare, has become the so-called microbiome. And we have to understand, in order to be fit, healthy, functional on all levels, physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, our microbiome, so the good bugs, which are on all the surfaces of the body. They're on our skin and our eyes, the oral tract, the urogenital tract, but also, and this is mostly discussed in science, the so-called digestive tract. And what's the relationship with those microbes, which make up a huge portion of our DNA, of our cells, even though they're not ours, but they're part of our human ecosystem. So how is the relationship between the human cells, so the epithelia, endothelial cells, and the microbes? But also, how's the relationship with our inner police, the so-called immune cells? Now, there are scientists who have actually researched that the relationship or sorry, not the relationship, but the what do you call it? The behavior really of immune cells being very aggressive or being completely laid back is very much also mirrored in the behavior of the whole person on the outside in relationship with other living beings. So it's quite an interesting subject. Now, the other area which we have to look at when we are dealing with consciousness-based integrative healthcare, including the environment, is the outer environment. Now, also, there's a lot of literature available. There is some of the very old studies around of electromagnetic fields, specific Earth radiation having an influence on the health and well-being of people. Von Paul, over or nearly 100 years ago, already researched, because he found a lot of people with cancer in specific streets of specific villages, which didn't happen in other areas of that village. So he, you know, with special dowsing, he measured and mapped all these areas. So this is an observation, and so these fields are a reality. However, how we interact with those fields could also be on the physical, emotional, mental, or spiritual level. So all of these relationships need to be looked at if we really want to address the whole human being. And so there's one area of the fields, which is the M fields, which we'll come to at a slightly later stage. But just in short, for me, it's the term for morphic resonance based on morphogenic or morphogenetic fields, which has been studied and discussed a lot by Rupert Sheldrake. Now, when we come to the highly discussed electromagnetic fields right now, we have to understand there is those natural fields and there's man-made fields. Now, natural fields can be beneficial to a human being, but they can also be felt pathological or detrimental to a human being. Man-made electromagnetic fields, which are basically around the subject of materials or even electrosmog, you know, so that is usually not so beneficial. So the question is, can we do without them? No, we can't. So the question is, what can we do to optimize our relationship from an individual's perspective with those fields that are in the so-called outer environment? Then there's the so-called locations we deal with every day. Our home has an energy field. In the home, we have grid lines, so we can't avoid grid lines. We have to remember that. You know, I can't find a place on this planet where there's no grid lines unless I spend my life on one specific square meter and don't move from there. So our home, our workplace, the physical workplace I'm talking here, or where we spend a lot of time, be it in our living room or in other areas with friends and people outside or indoors. And then there's fields of people, those so-called matrices I mentioned early on, fields of animals or plants. And the outer environment includes today also a lot of aspects of transport, because what's often forgotten is that modern transport system, which I assume we're all using these days, be it trains, cars, planes, and whatever, have a lot of electronics. So that means they create an interference pattern a lot of times with our own electromagnetic system in us. And also specific events, specific emotions. Right now, there's so much fear and maybe also anger in our environment. So if I am not neutral to this whole emotional setup, then obviously I may be much more easily affected. So we urgently need a science that honors and respects the unity of all life and recognizes the fundamental interdependence of all natural phenomena and reconnects us with the living earth. Now, we're living in a world which also has a lot of man-made energies in it, but for a start, you know, the essence of us, we are nature beings. So how can we bring together in harmony and in synergy, you know, what's been termed science, holistic science or conventional science, and philosophy, and also spirituality. So I think we are in the right place here. So I want to address mainly now the aspects of fields and matrices. And we have fields within our body-mind complex. Our whole body-mind complex is one field and unit of function, which we could also call a matrix. And at the same time, we have sub-fields and matrices inside, which the different microbes, microbiomal functions. We have our organ systems, our endocrine systems, our immune systems, and nervous system, and lots of other physical systems which create their own fields of function. But then we also have the outside fields. They can have an influence on our inside. So we have to always remember that not just potential, that reality actually of interaction. And so when we are trying to address the individual in healthcare, we have to remember that there is always an interchange going on. And so the question is, where's my starting point? And that's why I love priority-based approaches, because I can always say, okay, where am I going to start now? What level of manifestation am I supposed to be focusing on? Where is there an imbalance? But how can I and where can I correct that imbalance? So for example, if someone comes to me and has specific pain, and let's say the pain is in the shoulder, I know the shoulder is in pain. Obviously, that's the symptom. However, how and where should I be addressing that shoulder? Should we have been the inner wisdom of the body? Look at that shoulder. Where is the cause? And it could be that we have to balance the jaw, the TMJ, and in its relation to the navel. You know, so it's all about relationships. So once the jaw is in a better relationship with the navel, the shoulder pain may disappear. So those are all stories we can sometimes encounter when we're working with priorities in life. So I'm going to read to you this specific quote now, which I came across many years ago. Every system is composed of systems. Every system is a member of a system, and the forces between systems are systems. To understand any one system requires understanding the body as a whole, and to understand the body as a whole requires understanding each system. No one part or system is more fundamental than any other. So this is the total reality. So be it human beings, be it plant kingdom, animal kingdom, anything, and the mineral kingdom and so forth. And just our planet in connection to the other planets, all of that is systems. And if you see that image in the background of the slide, if I literally turn one wheel, the whole system will have to adjust. And the same will happen when I'm working with a field of people, when I do constellations work, matrix work, when I have to balance and optimize something, all the others will feel the shifts and changes, very much on the subtle level, but still, this is the beauty of being able to approach this. We always have to remember that our reaction or response to the outer and the inner environment is very much related to our five senses. Okay, the problem with our five senses is that they are very selective and subjective, because their programming is based on our personal experiences in our lifetime, and also what we potentially may have inherited. So we're never 100% neutral or seeing the truth or the real aspect of what may be happening to me. So we have to find a way of going beyond that, of literally finding a way of optimizing the level of resonance I mentioned early on, so I am more in tune and in sync with my truest health potential. And this is when we have the possibility of shifting from quantities to qualities. And this is part of the whole working, in a consciousness-based way. So, in the matrix, what is the matrix? James Oschman loves calling it the living matrix. And so he said, in the matrix, you find the causes and the healing for so-called systemic and chronic diseases. Now, he often refers to the matrix, which is in strong connection to our so-called ground substance in the body-mind complex. But as we know, the inner and the outer has a very strong connection there. So I know from my experience with groups works that if I see a disease situation in a group or of a group member, then there is some fault in the group energy field. So I have a lot of clients who say, whenever I go to work, I have this pain, and when I'm back home, I don't have that pain anymore. So something at work is affecting me. Obviously, it can be their desk, the location of their desk, and other factors there, but it could also be the energy field of the group at work. And so if I have worked, and I did quite a number of projects outside my PhD research of working with groups and matrices and companies, it was quite fascinating because I had one company where they encountered a lot of weird accidents with their employees. And once we balanced that whole energy field of the company, these accidents stopped. And that is, to me, fascinating coincidences, synchronicities, or is it really health and healing? And apart from that, their business improved as well. So that was a nice observation from the company owners. So these levels of matrices have been discussed and researched in a lot of literature. So I just mentioned James Oschman. I've already mentioned Rupert Sheldrake, and Lynn Taggart in her first book, The Field, she described a lot these interconnectivity and the potential of manifesting more balanced reality. And so for me, working with those M fields based on resonance that we are linking or attracted to link into certain situations in our life, be a member of specific groups and so forth, is all based on resonance. And we're going to look at resonance in a short way, because it helps us to understand if I want to change whatever I am experience out there in my life, I have to change what I'm attracting into my life. So I have to be more centered and more whole from within. But again, the field I would be a member of does play a role as well. So there is obviously fields that are slightly weaker, and there's fields that have a stronger influence. So generally, morphogenetic fields, if I define that from my perspective and also my experience, would be very strongly related to cultural, family, and also religious context. So if I'm a member of a specific group, and that group has existed for centuries, and that has a very strong influence in my system, for my system. If a group has just been formed yesterday, it may be still very wobbly, maybe just based on certain aspects of morphic resonance, it may grow into a specific morphogenic field. So the whole idea when I'm working with matrices and fields is obviously trying to create a stable or more stable environment, even though it's very intangible. And so it turns into a morphogenic field. Now, if we're working with this, which right now is not possible, but with this for generations, we create a very specific morphogenetic field of this specific aspect and subject. And we also know from research and observation that in relation to these so-called M fields, time and space do not really play a role. It's all about the similarity of those resonant patterns, which brings us back to the geometry and the fractal patterns and the interference patterns that are present in an invisible way in this living matrix we call manifestation. So, quantum physics, entanglement, and group environment. Physical, physiological, emotional, mental health. So we have to always remember all those layers and levels of the downward causation and manifestation process. Health or disease have some of their roots, and that's the interesting part. This is all proven by research in social coherence or the lack of that within group matrix fields. And this is based mostly on very high level of balance, more imbalance. So it's kind of supramental and mental and vital is obviously above the physical. So what does that mean? I, as an individual, and very much whether I want it or not, depending on the health of the society or the family I am a member of. And we create connections, connectivities, or bonds with anything we kind of encounter on a specific level of entrainment in our reality. So how can I as an individual, make sure that all the bonds I have with others are healthy? So all I can do is right now work on myself, work on the fields I am responsible for. But if I am an employer, a company owner, or even the head of a family, I could also say, okay, what else is there I can do for the members I am responsible for the members of my group? And so we find, again, systems constellation work, specific matrix work, and also field work, and harmonizing the space we live in and act through. And so I mentioned that earlier on that, based on all the stressors that I've encountered also with my patients, who always talk about their work, or children talk about their school and their parents, and the parents talk about their children and their parents, and so forth. Stress, distress is one of the causative factors, obviously, in the relationship or the lack of relationship or optimal relationship of the inner and outer environment. So that people feel I am no longer in sync or in tune with whatever the rhythms and the biorhythms and the flow of life. This aspect of dynamic, smooth balance in a lot of people feels quite disrupted or disruptive. Now, behind all of that is, in my perception experience, also the aspect of our emotions. We have to understand that emotions are very, very important for health and well-being. The problem is a lot of times we have too much of something or too little of something. And we also often entrapped in the what we call addictive pattern of so-called negative or pathological emotions. So how can I shift and change my well-being more into the aspect of positive, elevated or elevating emotions? Now, to me, the interesting part is that we talk about electromagnetic, okay, and in nature, okay, so in nature, natural, we have only, we can only, how can you say that, measure and test certain qualities which are beneficial to us, which is the so-called horizontal frequencies, not frequency, qualities of waves, which are actually magnetic. And those that are pathological for us, they are negative, okay, but they are electric. And so to me, that is quite an interesting observation. We'll come back to that later on. So I mentioned just now the perception of the relationship of the outer and inner, and what does it do to me? Am I really neutral? Am I going in with the flow of life or not? Is usually mirrored in my ability to switch between the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system functions throughout life. I'm able to process my reactions and emotions and the stressors, which I can encounter on so many different levels in my everyday life. Is no longer, because it's something really personal, no longer so extreme. So again, stressors we could meet physiologically, if I've eaten something that is not agreeing with my system, the emotional parts, if I encounter a lot of situation where there's a lot of anger, worry, fear, which can create ripple effects and be mirrored in my personal imbalances. Even mental thought patterns of negativity or positivity or involvement, victimhood, and other aspects, and even the aspects of environmental stresses. Now, this is a big thing. Obviously, today we talk about toxins and pollutions a lot. We talk a lot about microbes and also emotional fields out there. And then we have those psychosocial ideas of functional or dysfunctional groups and the genetic or epigenetic trends. So all of that is creating quite a soup function or dysfunction in our system. And so how can we come out of this specific loop, right? And as we can see in healthcare, we have a lot of very specific symptoms, which for me, have popped up in the last 20, 25 years. Before that, they were basically there, but not as like a pandemic. And so the NCDs, which I mentioned earlier on, are non-communicable diseases, which are basically all chronic diseases that are being looked at in our society right now. And MNDs are the so-called mental neurological diseases, which are big time on the increase. So we have the physical and we have the mental. So basically, a lot of different disease situations. But the question is, where can we find a solution? And often the solution cannot, because we're in that spiral of being constantly influenced and bombarded with our own emotions from the others, environmental factors of all kinds. And so how can we get out of that spiral of distress? And so how can we find, it's easier said than done, how can we find peace? How can we connect to our heart? So we have to understand that everything that is manifest as a wave, which has an amplitude, it has a frequency, but it is a wave of quantity, but it's also a wave that has qualities. And the question is always, we are also electromagnetic beings. So the question is, how can we as one electromagnetic being have a good relationship with other fields that have electromagnetic fields and frequencies? So as I mentioned early on, from a natural-based perspective, if we look at nature, okay, so we have to see that or understand that everything that is made by nature can have both. It can have horizontal wave qualities and it can have vertical wave qualities. And however, in human beings, we're usually attracted to what is health promoting, which is a horizontal. So even there's certain insects, which are what we call geopathic stress seekers, and others are geopathic stress avoiders. So if we're really connected to our truth and our inner state of balance, we would not be looking for the geopathic stress. But with the increase of the field of so-called electrosmog, which is kind of a smog that's running in the background, like the smog we see over cities and so forth, it's invisible, but it's very tangible, because we have a lot of people who have electrosensitivity these days and whatever. But in nature, we have to understand these fields are part of nature. Kind of, can sometimes say it's the meridian system of our mother planet. And so how can we observe that? We have to understand that for us, we usually would be pre-selecting the horizontal waves, but if we're not doing that, we have to do our best to come more in tune with what is nurturing to our system, what is beneficial to our system. And the so-called non-natural waves, which are man-made waves, they usually just have the vertical wave component. Since there is such an increase of those man-made waves, be it the real electronics, be it materials that are being used, or synthetics that are being produced even in the medical world. See, in the original days, all we had was plant-based medicine. Nothing was really produced in a laboratory with chemistry. And so if I am immersing myself in this vertical wave component field, I am kind of more saturated with that. So that means I create on the outside and on the inside more health challenges, and it would be more challenging to be more attracted to the horizontal aspect of health and well-being. So more so, we need modalities that help us to come out of this stress loop. So what can be done? What can we see? So distress is not something that is caused by the external environmental factors only, but more so by a communication breakdown and followed by chaos, obviously, and disconnections in this information network. Because our cells, we're very well aware that our cells are communicating on a consciousness level, on a mental, vital, emotional level, but also on a physical, physiological level. But behind all of that, there's a lot of electromagnetic communication going on. And if I have a stronger frequency interfering all of that, it's like a radio it's being interfered with, that can create severe disruptions unless we have the chance, especially at night, to lower our exposure to distress situations and really slip in a healthy environment. More so, that's what was my dissertation, right? Spend 8 hours a day plus connect to a very healthy environment. We have a big chance of living in harmony with in the world of modern technology, which no one really wants to miss out on. You know, you see the platform we're meeting on right now, and the beautiful exchanges we can have. But what else can we do? So one would be to focus again on coherence promoting factors and heart-based activities. So there's a deep reason why there's a lot of meditation out there, very specific movement, modalities being promoted these days, and also like-minded people drinking healthy water and doing coherence projects and intention projects and consciousness projects and meditation projects and all of that, because it's felt like if I meet like-minded, we're kind of connecting and there's resonance, and that kind of gives my system an overall tune-up. And doing that in a conscious manner helps me to be more home and feel more connected to myself. Okay, and in addition, it would be really great to have a centered, balanced, harmonized home environment. And obviously also at work or whilst traveling, because obviously I can't take my office with me, I can't take my bedroom with me when I'm on the go and teaching somewhere else. But there is unique and very specific solutions available. You know, my main modality that I would be using would be biogeometry, but there's others maybe as well which you have encountered which help you. And all of this would help us to create more and more resonant communication in connection with horizontal and heart-based and qualities that are connected to the essence of consciousness, of beingness, and it helps us to live in a more harmonized and balanced way in what Amicus Wellman used to always call the do-be-do-be-do. So there's action, there's relaxation, there's action, there's relaxation. Out of that we can grow, and there is creative ways and means. So there's always this constant dynamic, rhythmic, and change. And we have to see body, mind, and spirit, which has been focused on so much, is basically one unit of function, but it cannot be separated from the whole environment, because the environment is part of the overall consciousness that we have been talking about here. So I don't think I really have to define energy, because this is obviously a big subject of BioWell. And we have to see that a lot of times for people, it's what is energy, right? It's the ability to produce an effect, it's the capacity to work, and it also helps us to define, you know, different quantities of measurement depending on the device I have. And so when you are working in a consciousness-based field, using quantum-based principles, and also diving into the world of what we call subtle energies, more so we need devices that help us, A, to help prevent, but also B, not prevent, sorry, to show that we may be working on the level of prevention, because physical symptoms have not been manifested yet. But also that whatever has been addressed, to show that there is an effect. You know, we go through daily fluctuations, inner and outer environmental fluctuations. So, but we have specific personal trends. So I know when I do my BioWell tests, there is specific areas in my body-mind complex that would always show up in either way of balance or imbalance. And so I obviously have been very mindful of this. Sometimes it's an area I have already had in my lifetime, physical symptoms. Sometimes it's an area I'm very mindful of, especially on a mental or emotional level. And I'm hoping to address that with the modalities I use, so it all will be nice and neutral and balanced and harmonized. And then there is maybe momentarily ups or downs in the fluctuation process. Okay, so subtle energy balance is a vital factor in the success of any kind of orthodox or complementary or integrative medical treatment. So I guess this is what we're all interested in, and it's just supporting that, because we're working very much in the field of prevention. Leading researchers have modeled the fundamental mathematical and geometrical patterns that enables space to be holographic, fractal, tensegrous, vertical, informational. So this is something that James Oshman wrote to me 2 years ago when I was in the middle of my research. And to me, it just supported the field, the living matrix, not just in our body-mind complex, but in the whole process of manifestation in the world of we are dealing with. Okay, so to me, it's also nice to know and understand consciousness in a different way, because I'm a very practical person. I need modalities that I can relate to, that I'm in resonance with, and that I can use in a daily matter for myself, but also in my clinic. So subtle energy could be compared to an operating system and all the different software programs, which then obviously connect. And this is where the mental, emotional, supramental, and vital levels are mirrored. They are mirrored in our body. Okay, so there's lots of names for this living matrix: biofield, vital force, biophotons, torsion fields. They're all addressing different aspects in the world of subtle energy. Now, obviously, I want to come to groups, so I'm going a bit faster here. So the whole idea, once there is a balance in the subtle energy field, a balanced coherence, which means a specific connectivity and a specific geometry, then this can be mirrored on a physical, physiological level in the being. And it can immediately, instantaneously shift something. That's the amazing factor. You know, sometimes I have people coming for a balancing session as an individual, and then they go back and have their blood test done, and things are different, very different. Okay, but if there is the opposite, we always have the stress factors in our subtle energy field, in our life. Basically, the physiology, it has a very hard time to recover and to regenerate itself. Okay, so the beauty is we have BioWell. You know, in my research, I used the camera and I also used the glove. I didn't use the Sputnik because of lots of different reasons, but my vision would be, you know, continuing now working with fields and companies and spaces, harmonizing spaces. You know, definitely it's a beautiful tool to have, not just by what's happening on a mental level, but also what can be picked up by just harmonizing the whole space, which cannot change so easily, the whole structure of the space. And obviously heart rate variability is a beautiful way of examining this. And if you have the chance of measuring brain waves, this was quite a surprising factor in my research, because I did obviously the tests all throughout the day. And I found at the beginning, I thought I did a mismeasurement, you know, so I checked myself and said, no, I'm good. Because the majority of people that I measured, more than 60% of their brain waves were in delta. Now, as we are aware, delta is deep sleep, but they are coming to work. So that was quite frightening to me and surprising to me, but it also showed a level of exhaustion, a level of being able to regenerate, or that their systems were just switching off when they came to work. So obviously the whole idea would be, hey, I am at work, I can utilize my beta waves, I can use my alpha waves and even gamma waves and whatever, and be very creative and active. And at night I have the ability to regenerate and not just, you know, be on burnout or bore out or switch up, you know. So we have quantitative devices, we have also qualitative devices, which we can use in this kind of research. So I mentioned briefly the aspect of entrainment. Now there's an entrainment with the bio pacemakers we have inside, the inner entrainment. There's an outer entrainment with everything that's going on in life. You know, some people just flow with the aspects of life. We call it synchronicities at work. But a lot of people, most people would feel like I'm completely disconnected. I'm not entrained. They don't say it like this, but this is what we can say from a scientific perspective. Okay, so we can see that I, as an individual with my fields, am supposed to be in entrainment and in connectivity with the other fields that are around. And the interesting part from an entrainment perspective is that field that has a greater state of coherence. So there's always that example of the cuckoo clocks on one wall. So that field that has a greater state of coherence actually has the potential of having all the other fields joining in. And so this is my aim, right? Creating fields that have coherence. And then when I go as an individual, not knowing about coherence, into that field, entering a space or entering or becoming a group member or going to work, that field could actually help me to be more coherent within my own system and my own function. And so this is what's called we are entering. Okay. So all levels, types, and dimensions of energy fields communicate through resonance. I mentioned that early on. And so we have to understand that this level of communication is very important, because the question is really, what am I attracted to? You know, what is my inner state of balance and what am I attracted to on the outside? I can learn a lot if I'm mindful and if I'm aware about this. Okay, so I mentioned early on, what can we do? We can come back to a heart-based perspective, but that's easier said than done. There's a lot of modalities, classes, books, literature, and so forth out there that help us to, you know, connect to a greater heart level of coherence, starting with the HeartMath Institute and all their beautiful work they're doing. Joe Dispenza, Lynn McTaggart, a lot of these beautiful people, you know, help people to connect to their hearts. So we have a very magnetic emotional state, which helps us to be more in tune, in sync, and in resonance with the horizontal wave qualities, which are health promoting in our system. And this is connected with a clear thought pattern and not involved thought pattern, with a clear intention and trying to achieve my goal. So, okay, so the relationship is important. All the individual parts are important, and the connection between the parts is what we call the bonds. So we can work with those different interactions in lots of different ways using different modalities, which, you know, I just use my modalities, but you may know others. So we have to understand there is a constant and intimate contact amongst things that coexist and co-evolve in the universe. A sharing of bonds and messages that makes reality into a stupendous network of interaction and communication. I think this sentence by Erwin Laszlo just summarizes all of this really nicely. Okay, so group matrices, or M fields as I call them, I love calling them. We have to understand that there is the consciousness around a field, there is what we call the heads of the field. So if we took human fields now, we call them the matrix holders, which then determines the yin and yang, or masculine and feminine, or maternal and paternal balance within this group. And that has the potential of creating a unified field and also creating a specific geometry and structure, which then determines the relationship of the individual to that group and within that group. And the interesting part is that shifts can happen just very instantaneous. Okay, sometimes I had this in one of the groups I was working with in my dissertation. Just in the preparation phase, this person just left the job because he or she wasn't fitting into that group anymore because of the coherence we were working towards. So that was quite interesting for me to observe. Yeah. So the Earth and all of its inhabitants form one single living being. So we have to understand we are not separate from our planet, and our planet is not separate from us. Self-healing is going on all the time, whether we like it or not. You know, any kind of natural disaster or man-made disaster, it's part of the overall process of healing, and hopefully in the direction of greater coherence, greater level of consciousness, so you all will be able to connect to the divine consciousness and have ripple effects, happening in the individual being, connecting to those fields, the energy with information, as we can see here. I like this kind of conversation from a book by Amit Goswami. So the question is, how do these non-physical morphic, morphogenic, and morphogenetic fields interact with the physical realm? Because that's where we see it mirrored, right? In our physiology, in our physical being. And the answer of Schubert Sheldrake would be, the interaction of these fields is based on resonance. So that's the interaction. It is non-local, signalless, instantaneous. That means it's purely on a quantum level. That is a qualitative level. We cannot measure that. It's just there. These are the so-called quantum leaps. Okay, so coming back, we are the environment. And so if I understand that I, as an individual, the groups I'm interacting with and I'm working with and towards, have the ability to create, just throw a stone in the water and create ripple effects. There's a big potential in just creating a bigger awareness and doing my best. I always say work locally, think locally and think globally, because there is so many possibilities there and we have so much potential. Okay, so this continuum, which James Oschman refers to as the living matrix, I mentioned that earlier on, includes every organ, tissue, cell, molecule, atom, and subatomic particle within the body, as well as the energy fields and relations they engender and interact with. The living body has no clearly definable boundary. Okay, so let's remember that. And so we hope one day we can have this, whatever we talk about here, be called conventional or normal science and a normal approach to life and work. Okay, so what can we do, right? I told you I'm a very practical person, so there's no steps in what I'm prescribing here. It's just awarenesses from what I have learned for myself, based on my experience, teaching, practicing, training others, and also doing my research. So I think it all should start with us at home. We cannot make the world out there responsible for our own well-being. Even if I own a company or run a business or something in the sort, or even a family, you know, I would say, okay, I am, as an individual family member, as an individual group member, I am responsible for myself right now. Because once my system is well connected and well organized and interrelated, then obviously I can also have the potential of creating coherent patterns and supporting others. You've heard of people who were just sitting in the presence of a person and they just said, oh, my symptoms are gone. You know, so this is the beauty of it. So why can't we just imagine a space, an abode, you know, which is connected to the divine all the time? So some people go to temples, to churches, or other divine places, and say, oh, whenever I go there, I just feel peace inside. So let's try and find a way of taking that peaceful feeling home. And why do we always have to rush around? We never have that quiet moment. So let's try and find a way of creating that safe space, that safe field. But we also relate it to people. I'm coming back to this. So there's not one solution I'm offering here. Okay, so start with the materials we use when building, when buying furniture or cleaning our houses. All of that is helping us to be more in alignment with natural and man-made, versus man-made situations here. And then the next level would be I can also try and do my very best to optimize the energy of the space, harmonizing those vertical aspects of those grid lines that are ever present, and using, you know, whatever means you want to use. I would be using biogeometry, home balancing and centering. But there's also, you know, the systems work. So an individual, and I have a lot of patients whom I say, you know what, I feel we should not just work with you as an individual, we should work with your whole family. And some would say, yes, let's do that, because I understand there's the fields interacting with other fields. And if that field is more healthy, the individual group members would be more healthy. I have company owners who understand that. But there's often a lot of resistance as well, because this is the problem person, right? But that comes from a perception of separation, and this is not what holistic healthcare is about. I work with priorities, so the whole idea is to support us into regeneration and find our best possible way. Okay, so I mentioned it early on already, but this is where the slide is. So what we can see really when we're using BioWell, at least that's my perception on it, and I obviously don't have as much experience as many of you may have with BioWell, because I've just used it in the last couple of years. But I do understand the potential it has to visually show the befores and afters, and being able to demonstrate that we are on the right track. So thank you very much for being in this field, because I think we all together can make a big difference here. And so I already mentioned this early on. So what was my focus when doing that research? So the whole idea was providing an environment that is basically supportive to healing and supportive to well-being and distressing the situation, and then the individual would be more happy at work. Actually, we heard from the company owners of one of the groups I was working with that people were more communicating with one another, they were hanging out more with one another in the breaks, but they were also more productive at work. This is obviously the whole idea. You don't want people just to be cool at work, you want them to do their job. But they didn't need as much time for their job because they were more focused, their brain was more coherent, their heart was more coherent. And this is a very subjective observation from the company owners. So I'm sharing that with you at this time. So I was mentioning early on that I've created a list. This is just a list I came up with based on the literature I studied and based on my own experience. So it would be really great if we are aware of practitioners who address the physical body, because we still need that, but who also go from a downward causation model to go one level higher and the next level higher and the next level higher to really address all levels of function within the body-mind complex. Okay. So the basis of, and that's my perception of holistic and integrative healthcare, is basically we have to incorporate quantum and consciousness science. It doesn't work without it, as an awareness and understanding that there is the potential that I, as the observer, can help through the act of observing what I'm observing and so forth, help to change the potential for health and well-being, and not setting limitations and boundaries on what's happening in the situation I would be working in. And so obviously there's a lot of experience-based, there's some evidence-based, because we're doing more and more research in this field. So thank you so much, everyone who is working towards proving, for the conventional scientific community that this is really having an effect, a measurable, quantifiable effect for people. But healthcare has to be tailor-made. It cannot be one-fits-all situation. And again, I have to see the patient at the center of my focus, but where does the patient stop? Now, whatever I'm doing is not an alternative. It is literally trying to fit into the stage of life a person is, no matter whether it's a newborn or someone still in the womb or an older person, and also what's the outlook on life, whether they love taking natural medication or herbs and minerals and vitamins, or whether they are also taking conventional medication. And some people just need conventional medication. So that's the beauty of it, complementary and integrative, and addressing the whole person, and hopefully, helping them to feel better, feel more connected, and going with the flow of life. Quantum integrative medicine provides the possibility of bridging and connecting the two worlds of natural consciousness-based healthcare on one side and conventional medicine on the other side, joining them into true healthcare for the whole person. So that's my summary of what I have just said. Incorporating consciousness-based integrative healthcare principles in all areas of life offers a powerful contribution to solving today's economic and social challenges relating to the healthcare costs and acute and chronic disease in the whole of humanity. So I think we all have the potential of doing major contribution. And last but not least, I think I can say that the future of healthcare is already here, right? Because I'm not the only person who's having this focus and this approach, using consciousness-based, quantum-based, integrative modalities. And I'm also not the only person who's focusing on balancing the inner and outer environmental factors. But I very much appreciate of having been able to share my observations with you, and thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of the Congress.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Claudia, for this wonderful speech. Very, I can say, really holistic, really integrative. I don't know even other synonyms of this word that can describe this. very good approach, fundamental, and I think that many participants have enjoyed it very much. And thank you once again for making this presentation. And I will just tell that on YouTube, we have a longer version of Dr. Claudia's presentation, 1 hour length, so where she shares more information. So after the Congress, you will be able to watch